Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries. My name is Justin. So, let's talk about disfellowshipping, or rather, let's debunk disfellowshipping, which is without a doubt one of the Watchtower's most effective and powerful tools of control. The threat of being disfellowshipped hangs over the head of every baptized Jehovah's Witness, almost like an invisible sword, threatening to cut them off from everybody that they know and love if they dare change their beliefs, break a rule, or ask the wrong question. You know, as witnesses, we were told many things about the disfellowshipping policy and why we should support it and why we should follow through with the shunning. But what happens when you take these things and you put them under the magnification of reality? Does it still stand up, or does it crumble to its feet, like many of the other things that the Watchtower told us? Well, let's find out. So one of the main things that we were told about disfellowshipping is that it is loving discipline from Jehovah. Now, if that were true, if it was really loving discipline, wouldn't there be more love in this arrangement? Wouldn't there be more compassion, more understanding, more empathy? Wouldn't there be more of a human element in general? Because Jehovah's Witnesses willingly admit that none of us are perfect. But yet, Jehovah's Witnesses still hold each other up and measure each other up to this unattainable image of what a perfect Jehovah's Witness is supposed to be. So for example, let's say that you have somebody who has a serious issue with alcohol. Now that's a pretty common issue with Jehovah's Witnesses, and when you consider all the pressure that they live under, it's not too surprising why. But let's say that this man has already been counseled about it. His wife has reported him to the elders multiple times about it. Maybe he's even gotten a DUI. He's already been reproved, and he still can't quit. Now, in a case like this man has a very good chance of being disfellowshipped. And if you ask any witness, they would tell you that this man deserves to be disfellowshipped. He had multiple chances. He still couldn't get it right. Now he deserves to be kicked out. And they would think that this is somehow loving discipline. And so this man will be stripped away from his entire support system. All of his friends and extended family can no longer talk to him. Now, what do you think that is going to do to somebody who has an addiction issue? How is that loving or ethical in any logical way? Now, if this man was to get actual, real loving discipline, wouldn't these elders be helping him to find some alcohol support groups? I mean, for that matter, can you imagine if the Jehovah's Witnesses had their own version of Alcoholics Anonymous? Wouldn't that be more loving and more supportive to these people who have addiction issues, rather than just kicking them out and removing them from their whole support network? Now, furthermore, they say that these elders are supposed to be like counselors, right? So if it was really about loving discipline, these elders would do that. They would be counselors. What does that mean? That means that they would listen to these people openly, let them speak freely, and listen to them without judgment. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a Jehovah's Witness, let alone an elder, listening to you freely with no judgment, without going through the elder's manual in the back of their head? Can you imagine that? Well, if they were real counselors, as they say they are, then they would do that. They would listen to this person openly, let him speak freely, with no judgment, with the hope of finding out what is going on in this person's life that is causing them to have to drink so much. What internal upset do they have that they are trying to numb themselves of with all of this alcohol? And to go a step further, maybe they would also help this person to go through their family history to see if addiction issues run in their family. Maybe that's making it harder for them to quit. All of these things would be more understanding, truly loving, more empathetic, with the hope of actually really helping this person, not just punishing them. And that brings me to the next thing that we were told about disfellowshipping, which is that it is somehow helpful to the so-called wrongdoer. Now think about this. When you get disfellowshipped, You first spend hours being ridiculed by the elders, who will ask you all sorts of crazy things. There's no boundaries here. Then your name is publicly announced in front of the entire congregation. And in some cases, they will also announce you in your previous congregation. And then at that point, you are shunned. No active Jehovah's Witness is allowed to have any unnecessary contact with you. If they see you in the store, they will go the other way. Again, your entire support system is gone. And this includes your family. And you're telling me that you honestly believe that this is helpful to this person. First of all, isolation has been proven to be very damaging to mental health. A disfellowship person is not only isolated from their Jehovah's Witness family and friends, but they are also not supposed to hang out with non-Jehovah's Witnesses. So in other words, if you want to be reinstated in a reasonable amount of time, you must spend, on average, at least for my area, 6 to 18 months, that's a year and a half, completely isolated. Now again, that's average for my area. So if you saw something different in your area, please leave a comment below. Let us know what you saw. I always want to make sure that these videos are as accurate as possible. But for my area, that was the average. But can you imagine a year and a half being completely isolated? And I know some of you don't have to imagine it because you've already lived through it. Props to you for getting through that. And the crazy thing, if you think about it, somebody can go and rob a bank, get caught, go to jail, and even they will not be completely isolated. We don't isolate our worst criminals. When you go to jail, you still have to do something bad in jail to get thrown into solitary confinement because they know how damaging it is for your mental health. So no, the disfellowshipping policy is not helpful to the person. In fact, on a mental health level, it has been proven that it is actually the opposite. It is damaging to the person. And furthermore, the disfellowshipping policy does not help the people that really do need help. A little bit of a trigger warning here, but in the case of a rape, somebody has been through something very traumatic. They go to the elders for help. The elders make them sit through a judicial committee where that person now has to relive that trauma as the elders ask them all sorts of sick questions that if I were to repeat them on this video, the video can get flagged and taken down. Then if the elders decide that this person is not truly repentant for something that they did not ask for, by the way, they will have to go through more trauma as their name is publicly announced in front of the entire congregation. And then even more trauma as they are cut off from their friends and family, put into isolation. In a case like this, the disfellowshipping policy has stripped this person away from their entire support network system at a time when they need support the most. Now, if the Jehovah's Witnesses really had the goal of helping people, in a case like this, wouldn't they be helping this person to file a police report? Wouldn't they be listening to this person? Again, they say the elders are counselors. Okay, listen to a person like this. Bring them comfort. Help them out. Help them to get through it. Rather than victim blaming, announcing their name all over the congregation, and then kicking them out, stripping them away from everybody that they know and love. Wouldn't that be more helpful? Okay, so now we move on to my personal favorite one. That disfellowshipping keeps the congregation clean. Really? Okay, so check this out. Let's say that it is April 20th. And for some people in some areas, that only means one thing. So let's say that you have a couple witnesses and they get pressured by their friends to try some. They both have it, they both enjoy it, and then comes that fear and that guilt and that shame. And so both of them, after their next meeting, approach the elders and they admit to the horrible sin that they have just done by partaking in the devil's lettuce. So here's how it stacks up. Person A and person B, they both feel guilty about it. Person A and person B both told the elders right away. There was no delay in them telling on themselves. Person A and person B both have a clean record. And person A and person B are both just publishers. They don't hold any position in the congregation. So in other words, they are both on a level playing field. And so the elders ask them all these series of questions to determine how repentant they are. But then the elders ask them a very important question. Who else knows about it? And this is the question that breaks down the whole thing. You see, person A enjoyed his sin alone in his room with the window open, sprayed some Febreze afterwards. Nobody ever knew about it. Person B, on the other hand, was a little bit too careless. He enjoyed his sin sitting alone in his car, in his driveway, windows down on a sunny afternoon. And then some of his friends who live nearby, who are also Jehovah's Witnesses, just happened to pass by as he blew out the biggest cloud of smoke ever. They sent him a text that afternoon saying, "We saw what you did, we smelled it. If you don't go to the elders, we will." And so because the Jehovah's Witnesses are so focused on appearances, person A, who enjoyed the weed in his room, was only silently reproved because nobody knew about it. Whereas person B, who was witnessed by other witnesses, he got disfellowshipped because they had to make an example out of him. You see, this is something that most active Jehovah's Witnesses don't know about, unless they read the Elder's Manual, which most of them also don't know about. But what that says is that two people can commit the same mistake, right? But if one person commits it and people know about it, that person has a much higher chance of being disfellowshipped than somebody that does exactly the same thing, but nobody knows about it. Now, if the disfellowshipping policy is really about keeping the congregation clean, shouldn't both of these people get the same punishment for the same crime? I mean, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses standards, both of these people are equally dirty. So shouldn't they both have to leave to keep the congregation clean? You see what I'm saying? And of course, there's other cases like this too, where disfellowshipping is not exactly equal. And if it was about keeping the congregation clean, then it would be equal. For example, you could have somebody who is just your average Joe Jehovah's Witness, right? And then you could have another person who is the grandson of a circuit overseer, son of a very prominent elder, comes from a very well-known family in the organization. And both of them do exactly the same thing. They break the same rule, right? Now, because of this person having his family connections, he has a much higher chance of maybe being just silently reproved. Maybe not even that, maybe just getting a stern talking to, and that's it. Whereas the average Joe Jehovah's Witness, who did exactly the same thing, he is facing being reproved, maybe full-on disfellowshipped. And if you've been a witness long enough, then you've seen real-life examples of exactly that. I know I have. And that's not to say I'm not trying to pick on elders' kids. I know that you guys probably dealt with so much pressure being Jehovah's Witnesses, you probably deserve to have some loopholes, you know? But I'm just saying, if this was really about keeping the congregation clean, then the punishment should be equal for everybody, regardless of who you are, regardless of who you're related to, regardless of how it's going to reflect on your parents or your grandparents if you get disfellowshipped. That shouldn't matter. It should be fair for everybody. So let's do one more. The Watchtower says that disfellowshipping is only for people who are found unrepentant. So with that in mind, let's just look up what that word repentant actually means. And since the Watchtower loves to quote their Encyclopedia Britannica so much, well, we'll just do the same thing. So here's what it says. Repentant, to feel or show that you are sorry for something bad or wrong that you did, and that you want to do what is right. Another website defines repentance as this: humble realization of and regret for one's misdeeds, with the implication of a resolve to change. So repentance is really about showing that you're sorry, showing that you feel some regret, and showing that you have taken some steps to correct things. So if the elders are really trying to judge repentance, then shouldn't they be giving these people props just for coming to them in the first place and admitting that they did something wrong? Shouldn't you get some points for that? And shouldn't you also get some points for any and all actions that you have made to try to correct your steps and prove that you're trying to live your life the way that the Jehovah's Witnesses want you to live your life? So there's probably many more examples that I could give that truly show that disfellowshipping is not at all what we were taught that it was. So what is it? Well, It's a way of controlling people. It's a way of keeping people in line, keeping people scared, making sure that people do what they are told and don't ask too many questions. I mean, just the fact that disfellowshipping even exists in an organization that claims to be loving just shows that their definition of that word love is something different. It's something conditional. I love you if. I love you until. I love you, but. See what I'm saying? Who has time for that? Now, what would be actually loving? What would be a actually loving way of disfellowshipping someone? Well, as I said in another video, I'll say it again. They won't ever do this, but I'm just giving you an example of what could be done would be more healthier. So let's say that somebody has broken one of the Jehovah's Witnesses' many, many rules, okay? And they find themselves in a judicial committee, and they're facing being disfellowshipped. Now, a more loving way of handling this, instead of shunning this person and announcing their name in front of the whole congregation to shame them, a more loving way of doing it would be to have 3 or 4 people in the congregation who are seen as strong witnesses, who will then work as this person's mentor to help them get back on the right track. Wouldn't that be more loving and supportive than just throwing these people away? So long story short, the disfellowshipping policy is just one of many plastic swords that the Watchtower is swinging around trying to scare people. Don't pay any attention to it. And if you are a Jehovah's Witness watching this and you're still in your questioning phase, don't let these policies have any power over you. Take your power back, seriously. Because as you can see, when you put these things under a microscope, they don't stand up. They don't. So take your power back. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Take it easy on yourselves, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.